Welcome back to the studio. You're watching Eye on Africa. Here are our top stories in this edition. Going after Boko Haram, the international multinational task force has launched an offensive in the Lake Chad region to root the Nigerian Islamist militants there. We'll be getting the latest from our correspondent. Bracing for more crippling droughts to counter ongoing severe weather conditions in southern Africa, the Food and Agricultural Organization is asking for $1.2 billion in critical aid. Some 12.3 million people are believed to be at risk. And our summer series on African cuisine is back. Snails are a delicacy in Ivory Coast, and given their size, they're more of a main dish than a starter. It was in the works for weeks. Several armies have finally launched a joint offensive in the Lake Chad region against Boko Haram. The multinational joint task force is made up of 8,700 Nigerian, Cameroonian, Nigerian, and Chadian troops. It accelerated its timetable after Boko Haram attacked Boso in southeastern Niger. Several million people are affected by the conflict. Reporting live from Abuja is Chika Odua. Chika, it's been a year so far since the multinational task force has been in operation against Boko Haram. Where has it succeeded and where has it failed?
Just take a look at Boko Haram, for example. They've actually been around for 7 years, committing what the United Nations described this week as unimaginable atrocities. And this group has forced 2.5 million people to flee from their homes and has killed about 20,000 people. And so this same time last year, there was a lot of fear about Boko Haram in northeastern Nigeria. And in actually 3 particular states in the northeast were under state of emergency. So those states have been lifted off of the state of emergency. So that is a success. But let's actually run through the score sheet. So if we look at northeastern Nigeria, is northeastern Nigeria safer today than it was this time last year? Definitely yes, in some places, particularly in the cities. A lot of the displaced people have felt a sense of refuge, have felt some security in the safe havens of the cities, particularly in Maiduguri, which is where Boko Haram started. But if you look at Niger, is Niger safer today? No, not really. As you mentioned in Boso last month, at least 32 Nigerian soldiers were killed in a Boko Haram attack. If we look at Cameroon, is Cameroon safer today than it was last year? It remains to be seen in Cameroon, because in Cameroon, Boko Haram fighters have been fleeing Nigeria to run to Cameroon, and they're disguising to be refugees. Very dangerous situation. So it's a very mixed scorecard, and the challenges remain funding. Global support is really going towards the so-called Islamist state in Iraq and Syria. So a lot of the pledged funding to go for the multinational task force has not come through, specifically from France, from the UK, from the United States. It just has not come through because people are really looking elsewhere to fight this war on terrorism. Also coordination. This is not really a coordinated, integrated offensive. It's really just a bunch of soldiers from Niger, from Cameroon, from Chad, from Nigeria fighting on their own. And what we have instead of an integrated force is soldiers trying to make sure they don't step on each other's toes.
Thank you so much joining us live there. That was Chika Odua on the situation of the task force in fighting Boko Haram. On the same page, the governments of Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast are meeting in Yamoussoukro for their 5th summit as part of their Friendship and Cooperation Treaty. The 2 prime ministers talked terrorism after Burkina capital was targeted in January in a hostage situation that left 30 dead. In Ivory Coast, 19 people were killed in March on Grand Bassam Beach. The 2 countries are also set to sign a host of commercial contracts, including in the electricity, railway, and highway sectors. Zimbabwe is also witnessing crippling drought, a weather phenomenon that's affecting the entire southern African region. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization announced Thursday it needs to raise over $1 billion to help farmers plant crops in the new season. Laurent Bersticker has more.
Tilling a patch of dry soil in the hope of unearthing the last few cassava tubers. A daily routine for Mafios Ganiari. The farmer has had trouble feeding his family after a massive drought decimated crops and cattle across Zimbabwe this past year. He now fears more hardships in the months to come.
If nothing is taken as an assistance, then surely it means people are going to die.
According to the United Nations Development Program, 4.5 million people in Zimbabwe will need aid by next March. And with wells and water sources drying up, finding clean water is also becoming a challenge for rural populations.
Sometimes, when we take this water home, children get really sick from drinking. We try to boil it first.
The drought, which has been exacerbated by rising sea temperatures, a weather phenomenon known as El Niño, has been labeled the worst in 35 years. It now affects over 12 million people across 7 countries, prompting the UN's Food and Agriculture Agency to call for emergency funds.
We are requesting $1.2 billion US dollars for the Southern Africa emergency, the 7 priority countries. It is a lot of money. But if we do not mobilize that money, the humanitarian impact of the drought will be very, very serious.
A looming humanitarian crisis that places a particularly heavy burden on Zimbabwe, as the country is still trying to recover from a catastrophic 5-year recession.
Enforcing a ban on street hawkers in Lagos. Nigerian authorities are threatening them with a fine or a 6-month jail term. The law has existed for some time, but it has only been enforced in the last few weeks.
Every morning, Mama Baliki gets her little bags of popcorn ready to sell for the day. On a good day, she can earn as much as $16 selling them on the streets of Lagos. But the local governor is cracking down on street vendors like her. They now face up to 6 months in jail and a fine of $300.
I want the government to let us continue with our small street business because we can't afford to rent a shop, and the business feeds our family. Even people who own shops don't make as much money as I do going from door to door. There's so much tax on shops that they make very little profit.
Hawkers are everywhere in Nigeria's financial hub, often weaving through traffic to sell their fruit, drinks, films or books. The law aims to reduce the amount of road accidents and stop pickpocketing.
We are not criminals who have certificates. We are trained on what we are doing here. Most of us are trained.
In Nigeria, nearly half of young graduates are without work, and high inflation has driven up the cost of living, particularly for fuel and food. The country has also the highest population in Africa, with nearly 180 million people, most of which live in dire poverty. Now, traffic isn't the only thing vendors will be keeping an eye on. They'll also have to watch out for the police.
We end with our summer series on African cuisine. Today's plat du jour is escargot, but not the French kind. These snails are gigantic, weighing up to 1 kilo each. In Ivory Coast, they're a delicacy. Our correspondents sampled them.
A maze of alleyways makes up the market. It's easy to get lost, but Yvette knows what she's after, the finest snails in the city.
These are the best snails at Felicity's place because she doesn't sell farm snails. She sells snails that come from the countryside and forests. They are delicious.
They're impressive, weighing on average around 400 grams. Giant, slimy mollusks full of therapeutic properties. The shells, they say, can heal wounds and soothe stomach pains.
I have an ulcer, so I take them often. See the blue juice? Is it good? Yes, it is.
Yvette buys at least 5 kilos a day, 15 at the weekends because of higher demand. But to really enjoy them, it's better to know how they're prepared.
The snails are very dirty. They need to be washed well.
When night falls, the streets come alive. The snails are about to be cooked. The dish with onions, tomatoes, peppers and fish is Yvette's speciality. For 30 years, people have come far and wide to taste it.
There are big celebrities who come to eat here. Artists, actors, everyone comes to eat here.
After 30 minutes, the snails are finally ready.
They have a special flavor that's just to my taste. I love them. If I have to choose from what they have on the menu, it's the snails that I'll take first.
Raw, fried, stewed or cooked, the snails are eaten and loved in every way.
Bon appétit. That's the end of this edition. Stay tuned. There's more news coming up.